Hi, I'm Miss Torrijos, and this is my experiential project where I interviewed 3 people I know and I asked them questions about their experiences with death and what happened. And they all had different ways of grieving, they all had different ways that the situation happened, but overall, it was very interesting to know a little bit more about them. The first person I'm going to be talking about is my stepdad, who lost his wife. So this is a loss of spouse. Now, he lost his wife around 6 years ago. And before I begin talking about the other details, I just kind of want to give a brief overview of what happened, so we are on the same page. So this happened around 6 years ago, and my stepdad lost his wife due to cancer, and then a few years later he remarried my mom. And so this was actually the first person I interviewed. So let's get started. So about how long did it take to get to a normal state? Well, once she passed away, the cancer really overtook her body very quickly, and so he had no time to prepare. And he also said that he never realized how fast he was going to lose somebody. He really did not understand or comprehend that, because when they found out she had cancer, it was already too late to do any kind of treatment or there to be any hope. So she really only had around 1 month to live. It was very difficult because he realized that he would have to raise 4 children of his own. And at first, he was very bitter to love. He really did not want to find anybody else. He just felt like nobody else would compare to his wife. And he felt very depressed and lost for many years. He also said that he never really reached out for help or therapy, and that kind of also messed him up a little bit. And he says he's not completely over the death, but he made a huge step by remarrying somebody, which he thought he would never ever do. But later on, he realized that that kind of helped him become a new person. And yes, he still misses her, but he's also at peace knowing that she's not in pain anymore. So he's still trying to recover from that, is basically what he was telling me. So the next question is, what type of funeral did they have? When he was telling me this, I've never really been to a funeral before, but I was very interested to compare everybody's experiences. Her funeral was very quiet. It was very intimate as well. Only really close relatives were invited. Sometimes I know, and there's a tradition in my culture where a lot of people get invited, but for this one, it was just a very small, intimate one. He remembers that everyone wore black, and he also remembers that he was just very quiet and really didn't talk a lot. And he just felt really emotionless and also very shocked with everything that was happening. He couldn't accept it, and it was just a very mournful experience. And at the same time, it feels like his mind kind of repressed that memory because it was just a very dark time for him. So what did he learn about life as a result of the loss? So he realized that life goes by in a blur. Never in a million years would he have ever thought that he would marry somebody and then later that person would sadly pass away. He said that he realized that to really love the people around you and get close to them, because your life can be taken away quickly and you can't reverse time. He also learned that he should not take life for granted, because I was saying, that he was telling me, you don't know what's going to happen and how long somebody's going to be there for you. So he really learned how to also get closer to his children, and not to become bitter to love, because like he said, he was really bitter at the beginning, but then later on he was more welcoming, and he was actually able to remarry somebody, which was my mom. And so he said that he really found happiness in marrying somebody again. And so next off, I asked, is there anything specific that he would offer to somebody else, any advice? And he said that he wishes if anybody else is going through the same situation that he is going through, where somebody loses a spouse, he says that it's okay to find love later again, and sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, and not to rush it because you can't really stop yourself from loving somebody. But it's okay if you also find somebody else that you want to spend the rest of your life with. It's not like you're cheating on anybody. It's just that, or like that you're forgetting what happened. It's not that. It's also you trying to find happiness in your life and not be like miserable. He also wishes to tell people to get closer to their family and seek help from friends and family, because he said that he kind of just isolated himself for a long time, and he wishes that he would have changed that. He wishes that he could have gotten closer with his family instead. And so this was a very interesting interview, because I never really talked to him about that, and it was really interesting to learn all of this new stuff. And then we move on to the second person. I then interviewed my dad, and this is when my dad lost his mom. And again, giving a brief overview, this happened around 10 years ago. What led to her death was her age and also health complications that she was having. And this was a little bit more different than everybody else because my dad was all the way in Texas and she was all the way in Mexico, and the last time he physically saw her was probably many years ago. And so having to deal with like not seeing somebody and knowing they passed away was really hit him really hard. So let's keep going. So, once a death happens, he was explaining to me, it's not easy to get back to your life. Like, you can't just like wake up the next day and feel great. He said that it's really taking several steps in front, but also taking a few behind, because he felt that he really struggled a lot. Even though, she was all the way in Mexico, that was still his mom that raised him and supported him when he was a child. It also took him several years because he had already lost his dad when he was younger, and then knowing that he had neither of his parents anymore, it was hard for him. It did take him several years to get back to like a normal state, but also he knew that we needed him like as a family, and that he also had his own family that needed support, and he didn't want to leave us behind. So as of right now, he says that it does make him sad thinking about it, but also at the same time he's learned to kind of recover from it and know that she's in a better place right now. So what type of funeral did they have? This was different from the other people interviewed because, like I said, this funeral happened in Mexico. Sadly, my dad was not able to attend, but from what his other family members told him, that's what he was basing off of what happened. It was a very small town in Mexico, so the church and the cemetery, they were very close to one another. So they actually walked all the way from the church service to the cemetery all as one big family. And at the church, it was a very, sad and like respectful moment of peace for them. And once they got to the cemetery, they were still very sad, but they also wanted to remember like the happy times that happened. And she also knew so many people, so a lot of people were there, were present for that. And it was just like a mix of emotions. Many people, didn't know how to react. But he says that they were also playing music, like some of her favorite music. And it was like a mixture of both like mournful but also celebrating the happy times of her life that happened. Then I wanted to ask what he learned about life as a result of losing his mom. And he said that he learned how to appreciate more people in his life. He decided he wanted to get closer to us, like to his children, because he felt that maybe he was a little bit distant with his parents and he didn't want the same happening to us. He wanted me and my brothers to have a good time in life and wanted us to be happy. So his life changed gradually once that happened. And then I asked him about giving advice to other people who might be going through a similar situation or, stuff like that. And he says that he wishes he could tell people that at the end, everything is going to be alright, that in the moment, it may feel like the world is ending. And it's going to feel like that and it's going to suck. People go through different stages of grief, but it's not going to last like that forever. Soon you are able to cope with it and also realize that that person is in a much better place right now where they are. He also said that he wants people to rely on his family and friend support, because he felt that really helped him recover from the death and the grieving process, because he didn't want to eat for a long time. He felt really lonely. So he got really close and we were able to give him so much support, and he says that really, really helped him out. So if anybody else is going through the same thing, to just get kind of close to like your family and friends. And you can also have alone time, but also make sure to socialize a bit. And I never really talked about this with my dad, so it was a very interesting conversation to have. Yeah. The third person I'm going to be talking about is my aunt. Now, again, to give a brief overview, my aunt lost her baby due to a miscarriage, and she suffered a lot from it. I remember, because I've always been very close to my aunt, so I remember this is like it's a hard thing for her to talk about, but also she's willing to like spread the word about it and also talk about what happened. And I thought it would be a good time to interview her. So, about how long did it take for her to get back to a normal state? It did take her a while, and to this day, I think she says she's still kind of going through that grieving process at times, because sometimes she does feel lonely. Sometimes she wishes that she had a child with her. My aunt has always had complications with having children, and that moment when she realized she was pregnant, but then she later had a miscarriage, it was very, very devastating for her, and not just for her, but like her whole family, because we really wanted her to get pregnant and finally have a child, but sadly it was just not the time. And she kind of, at first when this happened, she didn't want to talk about it at all. And then later throughout the year, she learned that maybe she should talk about it. Maybe she shouldn't be like sad about it, because it wasn't her fault. Things sometimes just happen and we don't know or understand why. She did learn how to cope with it by also being like a dog mom. She says that, she treats her pets as if they were her own children. And she gets really distracted by them too. Like she may not be able to have a baby, but she can rely on her pets to be there for support. So this was a little bit interesting, because when it came to like the funeral service, the baby was never born. So they didn't really make a funeral, but she did hold a prayer service at her home. And I don't think I was invited. I think I was very young at that time. But from what she was telling me, she described it as bittersweet, because everybody was gathered around with her, supporting her. That was like the sweet part, but also very bitter that it was at a very, low time in her life where everybody was gathering. And it was a very mournful and sad funeral service, you know. She was very emotional through it all, and she kept it very private. Only a few friends and very close family members were invited to this. She told me that she learned many life lessons as a result of her miscarriage. And she said that at first she felt very, very angry of what happened, but then later realized that she shouldn't be angry because things sometimes happen for a reason and we do not understand why, and sometimes it isn't our fault. She also got very close to her faith, which also really helped her with the coping process. You know, people have different ways of coping, and she found that the church really helped her with that. And once, you know, she had the miscarriage, she like really did not take care of herself for a long time. So she also learned how to, you know, take care of herself and have self-love and respect for herself, since she was in pain for a very long time. So then I asked her about advice, because this is something very common that many women go through. And she said that she realized that, you know, sometimes death cannot be stopped. Sometimes there's no, like, solution to it. And it's not, you know, our own fault that it happens. Sometimes things just happen. And then she also said that you can spend, like, all your time crying and being sad, but at the end of the day, that's not going to help your case. You know, it's not going to make anything be better. So she says that it's okay to, like, cry and grieve, but also to later realize that things will be better and maybe you'll have another chance at it another time. So just to really work on self-love and becoming a better version of yourself. And so that's kind of the ending conclusion of the 3 people I interviewed. And then I have a few closing thoughts that I wanted to talk about. Like I said, death for me has always been a very tough subject, but I think this class has kind of given me that closure and realization that, you know, it's going to happen to everybody at one point. And nobody likes it, but it's going to happen. And I had a really good time knowing more about, like, these stories that, you know, these part of my family members were telling me. And I learned that so many people experience and deal with death differently. Like the textbook explains, you know, sometimes through the grieving process, people prefer to be alone. Others prefer to rely on friends and family. And there's just so many different, you know, ways that happen. And the textbook really opened my eyes to that, which I'm very grateful for, because now I feel like, yes, I'm going to be sad if that ever happens, but also know that there's people who go through the same thing. Thank you for listening to my presentation and for watching it. Have a good rest of your day.